But you went to Gaza, right? You said you went to Gaza. How come you went to Gaza when the world's media is not allowed into Gaza?
There's two reasons.
But they took you into Gaza.
Well, first of all, there are two ways to go into Gaza. One is with the IDF, which is what I did and what most Western journalists have done. The other is to go in with Hamas. You could probably go in with Hamas. I can't.
Ladies and gentlemen, your favorite white colonizer, Zionist prince, coming to you live from the United States of America. I'm Tal, the Traveling Clat. Get your white colonizer merch down below in the description at thetravelingclat.com. And let's jump right into this video on Douglas Murray.
You started with a peroration about me not mentioning the Palestinian casualties. That's because I started by mentioning the war. And there is no law of war that says you're allowed to start a war and then complain when you lose it. And if Medhi cares about the Palestinian casualties, as I'm sure he does, then tell your bosses in Qatar to tell their friends in Gaza to stop the war and give back the hostages. Gideon says Israel needs nothing more than criticism. As if Israel doesn't get criticism. Wow, he doesn't even read his own country's press. By the way, you said the other day in an interview, Gideon, I couldn't care less about the Jewish state. So we know very well where you're coming from. Let me just say a couple of things about that I didn't get to in my opening remarks, but are important. You know, if you didn't throng the streets of this city or any other for the actual genocide going on in Sudan, not the one that Medhi and Gideon pretend is happening, but the actual genocide going on in Sudan, if you didn't spend weekend after weekend doing that, but you did come out for the post-October the 7th protests, you're an anti-Semite. If, like Medhi once sent a tweet condemning that, it doesn't give you quite enough smoke cover. You know, if you protested not a bit, didn't set up a tent when Bashar al-Assad was killing 6 times the number of people in a decade that Israel and all of its enemies have lost in 75 years of war, you are an anti-Semite. And I would just add one other thing. I know that Medhi has tried to reframe the motion. I'm not going to allow it either. You know, maybe there is somebody in the world. Pakistan was invented, created as a state around the same time as Israel. I reckon that if this debate tonight was about Pakistan started a lot of wars, it suffered a lot of wars, it suffered a lot of casualties, caused a lot of casualties. But you know what? If somebody said, I think Pakistan should be abolished. They just don't have the right to a state, and although they had one set up for them many decades ago, we should abolish it. I think people would say, And then if the person said, but, oh, by the way, although I want to abolish that state, I have no problem with the Pakistani people. Please, please, of course you would.
But you went to Gaza, right? You said you went to Gaza. How come you went to Gaza when the world's media is not allowed into Gaza?
There's two reasons.
But they took you into Gaza.
Well, first of all, there are two ways to go into Gaza. One is with the IDF, which is what I did and what most Western journalists have done. The other is to go in with Hamas. You could probably go in with Hamas. I can't. Gideon said an appalling thing just there, that this is not about annihilation. One of the heads of Hamas, 2012, kill them all the Jews, don't leave a single one. When Yahya Sinwar said that we want to rip the hearts out of the Jews, it wasn't rhetoric. They did it. They mean it. And only this side wants to pretend they don't, for whatever reasons a psychologist would have to explain.
You're very bothered by Qatar and funding Hamas.
They're your bosses.
But, well, we're talking about bosses. Let's talk to this.
You're literally paid by them.
I've interviewed... Last time I checked, the United States Congress does not fund Bashar al-Assad or the RSF militias in Sudan. So stop with this lazy whataboutism that gives you...
They do fund your friends in Tehran.
The US Congress funds Tehran.
You know very well. Biden's package for Tehran.
What?
You don't know about it?
US funds Iran. Okay,
Oh,
you got me there,
dear me.
Douglas.
Wow.
By the way, since we're doing fact checks,
Since Biden decided to bring Iran back into JCPOA, they are no longer under the sanctions that they were, and have been brought back into the fold.
Okay.
I should say, since Medhi was honest, I'll say what I think. I think he's a very dishonest actor. A very dishonest actor. And to say what you just said about hostages would come a lot better if a contributor to Al Jazeera had not been discovered last week holding a hostage in his home. And if Medhi cares about the Palestinian casualties, as I'm sure he does, then tell your bosses in Qatar to tell their friends in Gaza to stop the war and give back the hostages. Bring back our girls, we had 10 years ago in the war in northern Nigeria, which I also covered. Bring back our girls. No international campaign saying bring back our Jewish children. Believe all women, we've been told for years. But turns out, not if the raped women are Jews. Israel is the only country in the world which, when it's attacked, gets attacked more. You know, the interesting thing about anti-Semitism is, as my late friend Jonathan Sachs said, it's a shape-shifting virus. It moves across the centuries. When you could hate people for their religion, the Jews were hated for their religion. Then you couldn't hate people for that anymore, so people hated the Jews for their race. And then, after the 20th century, people realized that wasn't such a great idea either. Now, the Jews are hated not for their religion or their race, but for having a state. People around the world hate them so much for it that Israelis are attacked when they have hostages taken, and this is to remember the 100 hostages still in captivity in Gaza, who, if they were given back by Hamas today, the war would be over. And they're also attacked when they rescue their hostages. You know, the interesting thing about anti-Semitism is the Jews can never win, because historically they've been hated for being rich and for being poor. They've been hated for integrating and for not integrating. They were hated for being stateless. Remember, rootless cosmopolitans, the far right used to say. And now they're hated for having a state. Today, the only really acceptable form of anti-Semitism, aside from the sewers of the far right, the only real tolerated form of anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. And Zionism, as we just heard, is simply the right of the Jews to self-determination in their historic homeland. That's all. Anti-Semitism, as we've also just heard, is double standards against Jewish people, or cruel and unfair treatment of people because they're Jews. This isn't very far away from home here. If this isn't anti-Semitism, can the audience here tell me why the following things have happened since October the 7th? Why in a Montreal suburb a synagogue should be firebombed, as happened in November? Why there should have been gunshots against the yeshiva? Why in Toronto a bookstore owned by a Jew should be attacked? Why a Molotov cocktail was thrown through a Jewish community center in Montreal? Why a Toronto Jewish deli in North York was firebombed? Why in Toronto the Orthodox synagogue was vandalized? Why in Toronto 2 men opened fire the other week on a Jewish girls' school? If it isn't anti-Semitism, tell me why just a week ago pro-Hamas protesters tried to go through Jewish areas in this city shouting not just Allahu Akbar, but, and I quote, sorry for the language, fucking filthy fucking Zionist pigs, dirty Zionist rats. Have you heard that language before? The Jews have. Now look, if you are interested in this motion, just bear this in mind. It's not about Netanyahu, it's not about this war, it's about double standards. And one question hovers over it above all. The question of who would protect the Jews. Who would you trust to protect them? The Europeans? The Arab world? No. History shows only one people will protect the Jewish people. The Jewish people. That's what Zionism is. Thank you.
He's absolutely correct. This is why we don't give a fuck about your weird ICC sanctions. We don't give a fuck about you prosecuting our prime minister, which, by the way, not a lot of us have a lot of sympathy for anymore. Yeah, I mean, again, I love a lot of things about Benjamin Netanyahu, but not like most of us don't want him to be prime minister anymore. We acknowledge that. But this is why we don't give a fuck about your opinion, because you're not going to protect us. You think you're going to fucking protect me? Look at the comments in this video. Look at the comments on this YouTube channel. Look at the comments on my Instagram. Just go to any of my social media. Do you know how many death threats I've gotten this last year? I've never served in the army. I've never killed anybody in my life. I am the descendant of refugees of Islamic persecution. Literally a journalist, like any Al Jazeera or Palestinian journalist, the same. On paper, the same. I have never done anything that could quantify me for war crimes or anything. I have not had any rights given to me, not like a single Palestinian journalist has, like a single Palestinian woman and child has. I am condemned to death for what reason? Because I fucking exist. So do you think we give a flying shit about what you have to say? We don't care. You need to understand this in your head. Not only do we not care, but we're coming for you. We're smarter than you. And this isn't a Jewish thing. This is a people who get it thing. It's not about the Jews right now. It's not about the Zionists. It's not about Israel or Israelis. There's people who get it, and there's people who don't get it. You don't know what you started on October 7th. You fucked with a lot of people. A lot of people. And I start drawing the line when you start calling my grandmother, my sweet brown raisin of a grandma. Okay? That lady is darker than a raisin on a summer day. When you start calling her a white colonizer, y'all done fucked up. We don't fuck with Safta Miriam. This channel knows it. This community knows it. That's all I gotta say. I love you guys a long time. Please do consider supporting my YouTube channel by buying some white colonizer merch down below in the description at thetravelingclad.com. Support the channel on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. All the great stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. I love you a long time. Goodbye, Clyde. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, buy me a coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat, or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.